Hey there, welcome to a very special International Women's Day edition of UnSpun with Guest. I was going to say guests, but it's just guests. But what a great guest we have today in Dr. Marina Adshade. Your title officially is Professor of Economics at the University of British Columbia. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And in your role today, however, you're coming to us to speak as a woman, most importantly, on International Women's Day. And Doctor, I'm so glad to have you with us. Talking through some of the stats that we know to be true of the impacts of COVID-19, particularly on women. Can you give us an idea of what the statistics are showing us and what economically women are dealing with, specifically here in BC?
Yeah, so in the past, whenever we've had economic downturns like we did in 2008, largely it was men who were affected because mostly it's manufacturing jobs. This COVID crisis has been completely different experience. And a lot of it has to do with the roles that women play in society. You know, I don't need to tell you that women take on the lion's share of caregiving, taking care of our children, taking care of our partners, taking care of our parents and siblings, and also just like wider community caregiving that we do. And because of that, we've had a big burden in the last year because there has been so much caregiving. But, you know, it goes beyond that. You know, as an economist who spends a lot of time looking at issues around gender, is that because we do so much caregiving, a lot of us have organized our lives in a way that makes that possible. And so because of that, women are spending a lot of time working in industries that give them the flexibility to take on caregiving responsibilities. Yeah. So, for example, here in BC, more than half of women work in healthcare, education, retail, and food services. Why? Because those are the caring occupations, the ones that make it possible for women to balance having children, taking care of their families, and working. And, you know, with the COVID crisis, those are the industries that have been particularly hard hit. And so right out of the gate, you know, back in March, I think the writing was on the wall for what was going to happen to women.
And, you know, and to add on top of that, as somebody who has been a single parent, you know, you throw lack of childcare into the mix. And I mean, we are caregivers and we are juggling every possible ball also with our foot, you know, hands in the air and feet going at 100 miles an hour at a regular rate during regular times. And this pandemic, I mean, the statistics, I was reading here, the recent study from BC Women's Health Foundation, Unmasking Gender Inequity. Women lost their jobs at a rate of 60% greater than men at the beginning of this pandemic. So on top of losing your livelihood, oftentimes you also lost childcare because there was no school. So even, I mean, I have a young teen, but he had just reached the point where I was able to leave him alone for a couple hours by himself. And I thought to myself, what would this have been like even just 2 years ago, where I couldn't move without having him covered? And the levels of anxiety and stress and economic impacts on women. I mean, I don't even know that we'll see the full impacts of that for years to come.
I think you're absolutely right about that. So I was also a single parent. I mean, I am a single parent. My children are grown. And I've really spent a lot of time reflecting in the last year about what my life would have been like had my children been young at this time. And, you know, that report that we did on unmasking gender inequality, you know, the thing is that a lot of the industries that women work in, because of this occupational segregation, they don't translate very well into working at home, right? Women who are working in retail cannot work at home. Women who are working in healthcare, they can't work at home. And so a lot of women were in the position and continue to be in the position of job or family, right? With not being able to balance both. And so while it is difficult for women who are working at home to take care of children, it's particularly difficult for women who are not working at home.
So, Dr. Adshade, how do we learn from this on this International Women's Day, have this discussion about it, and try and find ways to balance it? Is it even possible, given how very different the roles of men and women just are intrinsically in the home and also in the workplace?
So I think this is a really the key point question here is, what do we have to learn from this? And I think the thing that we have to learn from this is, despite the fact that women have made huge strides in achieving equality with men, there's still these very significant structural differences in the lives of women. You know, men do spend a lot of more time taking care of children now than they ever did in the past. But that doesn't mean that women aren't being, selected into occupations that have really put them at risk here, right? Like, we need to ask ourselves, why do more than half of women in this province work in 4 industries? And it's because of caregiving responsibilities. And so I think that's the most important thing we need to learn out of here is, despite all the progress we've made, there are still inequities, and they are making women vulnerable. And also, this comes up all the time. People are like, oh, well, women are leaving the workforce, as if somehow, like, all families out there can afford to lose one full income. There's a real cost to families when women leave the workforce.
Indeed. So let's talk through more of the frightening inequities that were unearthed. You called them sobering realities in your partnership with the BC Women's Health Foundation on this. What other data came to light that maybe would shock our listener?
Well, so for example, in March and April, if you look at what we call the effective unemployment rate, I mean, this is a number of hours lost because, industries shut down or because people couldn't work. For women in this province, it was 28%. That's higher than it was in the first year of the Great Depression, right? And then on top of that,
viscerally gives me goosebumps. Like, it's just so many women impacted simultaneously with really nowhere to go at that point, like that. So
and the thing is, even women who still had jobs, many of them had to cut back their hours to take care of their families. So, we were looking at 25% of total work hours, all the, literally millions of hours that women contribute in this province every week. 25% of them lost just to caregiving responsibilities. It was really, really quite startling. And it's really, really hard for some women to come back from that. I mean, the women who were hardest hit were young women, young women who work in retail. I think those women will be fine in the long run, but there's my particular worries about women who are older, because older women who lose their jobs, they have a much harder time finding new employment because there was a lot of discrimination against older women. And I worry about those women. I worry that there are women who are, in their mid-50s who will not be able to rejoin the workforce. And then what does that mean for them over the next couple of decades?
What does that mean, indeed? And ageism being what it is, that is obviously there are great efforts to equalize in some way, because a seasoned veteran professional man is an old woman. I mean, at exactly the same age, and just by the labels that have been societally put on our gender. And it's not a feminism, we deserve thing. There's a lot to be given by a savvy, educated, knowledgeable, hardworking 50-something woman. And how do we shift that narrative? I really struggle with that as a 53-year-old woman who...
we're the same age.
Oh, there you go. High fives, because I like to look at it as the youth of old age, where your 40s were the old age of youth. I feel so valuable in what I can bring to the table now. I'm beyond my childbearing years, so I'm not going to all of a sudden get pregnant and need a year off. Not that there's anything wrong with needing that, but those conversations around this are uncomfortable for men to have, frankly, uncomfortable. And that's not men aren't open to it. It's they just don't know what to do. We don't know what to do either, but it's got to start somewhere.
Absolutely. What's interesting for women of our age is we're part of the first generation of women who went to university at higher rates than men. We have 20, 30 years of work experience. Why would we as a society want to lose those important contributions? I mean, this is why I think that every time I talk about this, I always try to stress the fact that this is not just about fairness. This is not just what is it's not just about heart, it's about smart as well, right? It's in
Yes.
everybody's best interest that women are working.
I love that it's not just about heart, it's about smart.
Yeah.
We could do T-shirts on that one. We're with Dr. Marina Adshade. Just so people, if they're tuning in going, wow, this woman is brilliant. She is. She's a professor of economics at the University of British Columbia and is a big part of unmasking gender inequity, which is a recent study from the BC Women's Health Foundation. So important that these studies are taking place because while we might have assumed or even acknowledged that women have been hit extra hard by this COVID-19 pandemic, no one could really have imagined to the degree that we are seeing. So to continue on through the statistics of this and who's hit as hard as they are, certainly those trying to re-enter the workforce, but also some who might find themselves in the mental health state of feeling I just had gotten myself out of the childcare rut and managed to find the spot and then got myself into the workforce and now I'm knocked back all those steps. I don't have it in me to move the meter again, carry that weight forward. What can you and I say that might help that one woman listening right now is like, I can't.
I really think that we need to support one another. The whole, throughout this whole thing, everyone's like, we need to be kind. I might feel like it's being a little bit overplayed, but we really do need to be.
We really do.
Right? I mean, the amount that we need, we should be supporting one another and having patience for one another is really, really important in this moment, to listen, to be available, to lift each other up. I think that, these things were always important, but they've never been more important than they are now.
Amen to that. And I should mention that how you and I connected was through the fine people at Coast Capital Savings. And this is not an ad campaign. This is one of the things that Coast Capital, I think, does so well in trying to really help the community. And Keep Her on the Map is an initiative for International Women's Day by Coast Capital, asking Canadians to take action to turn the tide on unintended consequences born out of this ongoing health crisis. So the credit union is actually encouraging support of women-owned businesses to help women. And for women who have the ability to support women-owned businesses, to do that with our dollars.
Absolutely.
These are great first positive steps that really can be taken, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because, this is not solving the inequities and lifting women up. This is not just women's responsibility. This is everybody's responsibility. And, initiatives like this one with the Coast Capital, with the Keep Her on the Map, I really appreciate the role that businesses are taking in trying to kind of shift the dial on women's experiences. And, I think too, the importance of this particular campaign is we have not spent a lot of time talking about women-owned businesses.
No.
And, women have a tendency to have businesses that involve a kind of lot of interpersonal interaction. They are physiotherapists or massage therapists or dentists, or they have retail stores or food outlets. All of these businesses are the ones that have been particularly hit. They're the ones where, because you have so much face-to-face interaction with other people, they are at the largest risk of COVID infection. Yeah. They are also at the largest risk of being shut down whenever we need to go into a lockdown. So women-led businesses, I think, are being disproportionately hurt in this whole experience. And they're, going back to the idea of lifting people up, is that we need to support those businesses. We need to support those businesses because it's the right thing to do. But we need to support them because we still want them to be around, right, when this is all over, right? And it's important for everybody that we do that. We can be ethical consumers. And I think that now is really a time for people to be really thoughtful about where they do their business and helping to support local businesses so that they can continue to survive and to thrive as we kind of find our way out of this.
Yeah, the post-pandemic, the echo effect of this and how we can have meaningful impact. We as the community, not we as women necessarily, but we, men, women, people of all walks of life, gender and sexual identities, all of us together as a community, if we really focus hard on local, I think is also a really important piece of this, because the big businesses, the big industries are going to find a way to machine through. Some have thrived in this, as you well know, as an economics professor at UBC. How do we help in the immediate? Do you have advice or some workable tools that you might be able to share with women, or just people, human beings who are struggling with the economics of COVID-19, if they've found themselves with the shuttered business or inability to do their job, struggling with the at-home environment, making ends meet? Are there a few tools or some 101, economics 101 that you could give? It's a tough one, doctor. My arm hurts when I do this. Any advice?
Being an economics professor, this has been such an interesting time to be teaching, because I'm finding myself having to take questions from students that I really just don't have the answers to, because it is so unlike any other period. But in terms of tools for individuals, I think, first of all, we are very, very lucky as Canadians. I mean, there is an amazing amount of government support out there. And so I think the most important thing for both individuals and businesses is to make sure that they're tapping in to all of the resources that are available to them, and finding what those are, and connecting with Revenue Canada, for example, and looking to see what happens also at the provincial level. There's a lot of resources that are available, so I think that's really, really key. I think that it's been a difficult period because, for example, if you look at, say, landlords, it's a difficult time to be a landlord, but it's also an incredibly difficult time to be a tenant, right? And so everybody has to kind of work together to find a middle ground so that we can all get through this experience. I think that that's the real challenge, and I think it's a real challenge for businesses, and it's a real challenge for individuals.
I love that answer, because it gives comfort for those of us who are saying out loud, I have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
All I know is I'm going to keep moving forward, and I'm going to do so with the best of intention to do the best I can for the next hour or the next minute of the day. And I also really appreciate the message of just, look for those supports and take advantage of the opportunity to have the supports that are offered to you by your government, wherever you might be. Because some people are very proud about that and don't want to ask for the help when they need it. And we are so lucky to be in Canada, not only because the supports are there from a government standpoint, but also that if you need help with your health, just south of the border, that could be a bankruptcy. Yeah. Having one issue with your health. So being mindful as women in particular, who will, I don't know if you're like me, but you probably are, we will put ourselves last often. And it's important that we make sure that we are moving forward as a whole, because everybody suffers if the woman in the family or in the household is not being cared for as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, simple things like making sure that everybody gets enough sleep, eats properly. Huge. I mean, these are things that, it's funny because at the beginning of the lockdown, I think a lot of us thought, oh, my house will never be cleaner, and I'm going to get in shape, and I'm going to eat so well, and I'm going to be like making my own food. And for me, I mean, I don't know about you, but none of this has been a reality. And that's because my work life has been so hectic, right? I mean, I'm tired. And I think a lot of people are tired, right? And so we do need to take care of ourselves, and we need to take care of each other.
I like the sleep hygiene is huge. And I think it's been, especially on the caregiving, stressed out women on this International Women's Day, like how we start with this about how this has impacted women to the nth degree. I had a conversation because counseling is also a great opportunity for women who put ourselves last, to be able to just have a conversation, now virtual, very easy to set up. You can do it just like you and I are talking right now, and have somebody, an impartial, knowledgeable individual, give the advice or be able to say, how your sleep is. And you go, what's sleep? right? And just even saying that out loud, you'll find yourself, you just need to lean somewhere. And again, Coast Capital comes into play because they are making themselves available for that financial piece, for women in particular, kicking off this keeper on the map, elevating the awareness of wanting to have that conversation. Debt's a big part of this as well. Yeah. People get embarrassed, especially women trying to make ends meet and scrape together. They don't want to say, I can't, because we've been raised to say I can in the face of anything.
Yep. And actually, just on the topic of Coast Capital, is that they also have services and advice available to businesses on how to cope. I mean, I think that it's not just it's a financial institution, but it also is a source of information. And I think that we all need to be identifying these sources right now and tapping into them and making sure that we're getting all the support that we need.
And sometimes people think of going to a financial institution and fearful of maybe being taken for a ride, as opposed to being informed and allowed to walk out the door not having signed a darn thing. Here's an opportunity to have that. I mean, just in my golf tournament hosting and charitable endeavors that are sponsored by Coast Capital, I've seen their hard community works in action. And I think there's a message within all of this that there's just tap into that, make the call, ask the question, and feel confident that the person on the other end of the line is really trying to help you.
Yeah, I think it's clear that they're really committed to diversity, as we all should be committed to diversity. Should. Go back to the statistics. McKinsey report came out with a measure for British Columbia, and they said that if women had equality with men in this province, our GDP or output would be 8% higher. That's a huge difference in output. And so then you think, okay, so that's what the number was a year ago. If we're being set back now, what does that mean for us, right? Yeah. And so having organizations that are committed to diversity, having individuals who are committed to diversity, I think this is so key for us. As a province, as a community, as people who care about one another.
And that's, at the root of everything, Doctor, that for me, I do love your message, even in an economic conversation, that we are actually talking about looking out for one another and caring for one another and lifting each other up. And we all know somebody in our friend group or in our community who's struggling. And how can we help just a little bit? Just a little, whether it's, making a little extra food at your dinner time and pop it in the freezer and just making sure that their freezer's stocked. So maybe this week it's not a big grocery bill for them, or helping out with the childcare once our bubbles are able to expand again, identifying where the need is. Yeah. When you mentioned the GDP though, holy cow, that's stimulus right there. If we can get women back to work to the degree that it has been impacted. I mean.
Yeah. And there's another thing too here is that, people, we care about leadership, right? Leadership that is, political leadership, leadership that is corporate leadership, leadership in all of our communities. And if we don't free women up to take on those leadership roles, women's voices are never going to be heard. And women, if women's voices are not being heard, then decisions are not being made that make women's lives better. Make families' lives better. And so I think that it's really, really important to keep that in mind of that leadership role. I just like to put a small comment about politics. It's not, I don't know, Canadians don't really talk that much about politics. I am a Canadian, but, I think that now would be a really good time for us to look around at the women who are in our communities who are in leadership positions and encouraging them to take on political roles. We still, in Canada, 70% of our members of parliament are men. We can change this, right?
I saw the premier's meeting. We're recording this on Friday. So yesterday was the premier's. They actually had it broadcast on CBC News Network with all of the men of Canada sitting, and it was really striking to see that, and that's no knock on them. anybody who takes a role in public office, is really dedicated to the future of our country. But as you said, we need to support
Yeah.
the caregivers of our society, of our country, to slide in, because if you also look at the health officers in each of those provinces, most are women.
Yeah, women. It's actually funny because it's the health officers. Our minister of procurement, who's been responsible for the vaccine, is a woman. The minister of health is a woman. We know one thing. We know is that the countries that have had women leaders have done much better in the COVID crisis than countries that have men. And this is not just anecdote. This is fact.
Yeah.
And in Canada, we have a lot of women in positions of leadership, but we could also use a lot more. Like 10 years ago, we had a lot more women who were premiers than we have now. I don't know what happened. We seem to have turned back the tide on that a little bit, but there's women who are in our lives, who could take on these roles. And the time to think about this is not during an election, it's now. Right. And thinking about who we could lift up. Somebody told me a great story the other day about a woman wanted to run for mayor. This is in BC, but I'm not sure what town it was. And it was a 35-day campaign. And for 35 days, all of her friends got together and had dinner at her house every night and made sure she had childcare. And then she won. And I love this story because this is what it takes to get women in positions of leadership so that we can all, thrive. We need that.
Full goosebumps on that final statement. Like, that is what we need. It really does summarize everything we've touched on over the course of this conversation. It does take a village, a community, a province, a country in order to lift one another into these roles that are so important. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for your hard work and being a pillar of our community and what you're doing each and every day. Thanks so much for doing this.
It's a pleasure to be here. And, I do this work because I care about our daughters, and our sons. I want a better world for them.
I think we can agree for all those tuned in that the conversation is so specific to women because it's important to have these conversations. It's not threatening to men. It's not anti-man. It is not anti-establishment. It is creating and growing a better city, province, country, world. And I think the conversations start here with people like you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.